This is the story of Richard, a cashier who loses his job for a small act of kindness, giving free diapers to a young mother in need. Just when things seem at their worst, a helicopter lands nearby, and someone steps out who could change everything for him. Hi everyone, welcome to Tales Unveiled. Let's get started. That'll be $299, miss, Richard said, handing the bill to a teenage girl in torn jeans with a crying baby in her arms, about 6 months old. Shut her up, a young man yelled, looking up from his phone. The girl hurriedly pulled a pacifier from her jeans pocket, and the baby finally quieted. She then pulled out a single bill, far less than the total. She glanced up at Richard, her helpless eyes striking a chord in him. The young man shouted again, "Come on, we don't have all day. Can't you move faster?" Richard's heart ached as he watched her struggle, but to keep his job, he said, "Mom, would you like me to remove any of these items?" The girl glanced at her few purchases, just baby food and diapers. Richard understood. She needed everything she'd selected, yet she simply didn't have enough money. Slowly and with obvious reluctance, she touched the diapers. "I don't need this," she murmured. Richard set the diapers aside and recalculated. "That'll be $10.99. She handed over her last dollar and started to leave when Richard called out, You can keep the diapers." The girl stopped, stunned. "Are you sure? I don't have the money to pay." "I made a mistake, actually," Richard said with a smile. "There's a promotion today. You're our lucky customer, randomly chosen for a free gift. And I think these diapers will be just the right one for you." She looked at him with joy and gratitude. "Thank you so much. This is a gift from heaven," she said, tears welling up as she held his hand. "You don't know how much this means to me." Richard patted her shoulder as she turned, nearly dancing out of the store, kissing her baby's cheek. She'd never imagined she'd be able to afford the diapers today. "The young girl we met is Susan Hamilton, daughter of Catherine and Donald Hamilton, and younger sister to Elizabeth Hamilton. She was living her dream life until she met Brad, captain of the high school basketball team. As captain of the cheerleading squad, Susan was no less popular. Soon they became the talk of the school, a charismatic couple, envied by all. Susan was deeply in love with Brad, but Brad wasn't interested in commitment. He stayed with Susan for the popularity boost only. Later, when she became pregnant with little Lily, Susan realized his true intentions. Her parents couldn't accept her teenage pregnancy, and Brad showed no sympathy, already dating Tia, the daughter of superstar Liam. Learning of Brad's betrayal crushed Susan, but she found purpose in her unborn child. After Lily's birth, seeing her tiny fingers and toes, Susan knew she'd made the right choice. She embraced her daughter with all her love and care. Soon, though, Susan realized love alone wouldn't be enough to support her baby. She took a job as a janitor at a high school, tying Lily on her back while she worked, as there was no one else to look after her. She fashioned a baby carrier from old clothes. But one day, the principal saw her breastfeeding near the cafeteria and gave her a warning. After that, Susan brought Lily to work secretly. One afternoon, a young girl just a couple of years younger than Susan slipped on the wet floor. She tripped over a pacifier left behind in the hall. The girl, the mayor's spoiled daughter, caused an immediate scene. "Why is there a pacifier in the school? Whose baby is still using a pacifier here?" she demanded, laughing with her group. Some students smirked, while others murmured in disapproval. Though the principal managed the incident, Susan lost her job. After all, She had ruined the mayor's daughter's day. No one else would hire her after that. It had been a month since then, and life hadn't gotten any easier for Susan. But today was different. For once, something good had happened. After months of hardship, she received a blessing, and tears of joy filled her eyes. She was walking home when a limousine pulled up in front of her, startling her as she stepped back. Meanwhile, Richard opened the door to his small apartment and collapsed onto the bed. Today, he'd lost the only job he had, the reason being that he had given a struggling mother a free item, which as a low-ranking employee, he wasn't authorized to do. His new manager, Brad, had made that crystal clear when he fired him. Richard sighed as he looked at his calendar. Christmas was around the corner, and he promised his parents he'd visit this year, bringing presents for his little nephew. But now, with no job and rent due, he wasn't sure how he'd keep that promise. Richard closed his eyes in despair, haunted by memories of his late sister Rosie. She had died so young, all because she'd fallen for the wrong man and become a teenage mother. The jerk Stephen had completely ignored her when she needed him most. Why would he care? By then, he was already dating someone else. Even Richard's parents had thrown Rosie out of their home at the time. Richard was in a different city, trying to make it as a musician, unaware of what was happening in Rosie's life. If he had known, he would have done anything to help her. But by the time he learned the truth, Rosie was gone. The young girl had been too overwhelmed by motherhood and the weight of her responsibilities. One day, exhausted and distracted, she crossed the street without noticing the light was green. Crash. Richard jolted awake, sitting up in shock, his heart racing. The way the witnesses had described her accident that day still tore at him. He'd held back his grief then, for the sake of his nephew, who had miraculously survived, cradled in the baby carrier Rosie was wearing. His parents had realized their terrible mistake too late. But to make amends, they dedicated themselves to raising Rosie's son Robbie and giving him a better life. Seeing the teenage mother at the store that day had weakened Richard. She reminded him of Rosie, her struggles, and his own failure to be there when she needed him most. So he'd done whatever he could to help, seeing Rosie's reflection in her. But he never expected that small act of kindness to cost him his job and spoil Robbie's Christmas. Why was fate so unforgiving? Couldn't it grant him a reprieve from his past mistakes? Richard's thoughts were interrupted by a loud noise outside. Oh great! Why did I have to rent an apartment next to a hotel with a helipad? He thought, frustrated. Every time I'm in a foul mood, another helicopter lands with that awful noise. He walked to the window to close it, but then he noticed someone stepping out of the helicopter. A woman, around his age, dressed in a sharp black suit with matching trousers and sunglasses that added to her confident look. A man, perhaps her assistant, leaned in to say something and pointed directly at Richard's apartment. Richard's stomach twisted. Am I just imagining things? He wondered, shaking it off. There's a distance between the hotel and here. I must be overthinking. He closed the window, missing the sight of another teenage girl stepping out of the helicopter, carrying a baby in a carrier. Ring, ring. Richard had just finished a shower and was drying his hair when he heard the doorbell. Tossing the towel onto his bed, he moved to open the door. Standing there was the same woman he'd seen step out of the helicopter. So I wasn't imagining things, he thought. That man did point at my apartment. Richard Anderson? The woman asked. Yes, he replied, curious. I'm Elizabeth Hamilton, owner of the Hamilton Hotel chain. Could we talk for a moment? She asked. Elizabeth Hamilton. Richard's mind raced. The Elizabeth Hamilton who owns over 50 hotels and recently won Youngest Entrepreneur of the Year in a business magazine. Why is she here? Am I in some kind of trouble? Excuse me, Elizabeth said gently, noticing his silence. Snapping back to reality, Richard stammered, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Please come in." Elizabeth walked into his cozy apartment. "Would you like some tea or coffee?" he offered. "No, thank you." She smiled and took his hands in hers. "I'm here to thank you. You're the only person who showed such kindness to my sister, and I'll never forget the compassion you showed her." "Your sister?" Richard's face filled with surprise. "Yes, the girl you helped at the store. The one you lost your job over for giving the free diapers. She's my sister, Susan," Elizabeth explained, leaving Richard speechless. "So Susan is—" "Susan Hamilton," Richard managed to say, stunned. He could hardly believe he'd given free diapers to someone who could probably buy the entire diaper company. Elizabeth laughed lightly. "Yes, unfortunately, she made a bad choice in trusting the wrong person. Instead of supporting her, our parents turned her away. I was abroad for business and didn't know what was happening until recently." "How did you find out about me?" Richard asked.